Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. So my name's Katie and today we're going to be doing my May wrap up. So a couple of the books at the start of this wrap up are actually from April, but we won't talk about that because I often film wrap ups like a few days before the end of the month, and then sometimes I get an extra book in there. So yes, I don't know what I'm saying. Let's just get started. I don't really have anything else to say, so yeah. So the first book I read was Hanu and Nishi's Guide to Fake Dating, which is a sort of sapphic YA rom-com, which I enjoyed this. I gave it 3 stars because it, or maybe 3.5, 3/3.5, because it wasn't my favourite ever. I feel bad because in a way I feel like I've grown a little bit out of like YA contemporary, and I feel like it is a really good book to like have out there, but I didn't like it quite as much as the author's first book, The Henna Wars. I just feel like there was quite a lot of like themes and topics that tried to be tackled, but then it ended up, none of it sort of ended up getting resolved. Like there was a little bit of resolution, but a lot of it was just left hanging. So I mean, it would be really good if there was a sequel, but there was just a lot of kind of different conflicts, and then it just felt really kind of, you got no closure, which I guess sometimes happens in real life, but also it wasn't like, sometimes when you get no closure, it's just you don't get what you want, but whereas in this one it feels like it just cut off in the middle of a storyline, if that makes sense. But I did really like both the main characters, Hanu and Nishi. They were both really like, their personalities like complemented each other really well, and Hanu especially, she's kind of quite like, outwardly she's like quite popular and outgoing, but she's obviously has a lot of like, she's very sort of lacks self-esteem, I guess. Like she has to kind of follow the crowd and like try to fit in really hard, and she feels like if she kind of asserts herself or is herself, then she'll be sort of rejected. Whereas Issue's kind of more like social, is more like socially outcast, but she's a lot more kind of self-confident and just does what she kind of wants to do. So I think that's a very interesting contrast, and I guess I sort of like the fake dating setup, although it just felt like they were actually dating, which I guess they kind of were. But also, yeah, Hanu's friends were very, very toxic. Yeah, a lot of red flags there. So I just felt like it was a little bit like, but then I guess teenagers maybe don't see those sort of red flags. So yeah, I just didn't really understand why she would want to be friends with them, but then again, teenagers, so maybe. But yeah, I think especially if you like YA contemporary, you'll really like that one. So yeah. Then I also read The Lights of Prague by Nicole Jarvis, and I really enjoyed this one. I gave this one 4 stars, and I love the Prague setting. It's really cool. I like Prague as a city. I've been once, but I just feel like it's a perfect place to set like atmospheric vampire-y books, which this one is. And we're following 2 main characters, so Dominic and Olga. Is it Olga? I think it's Olga. It might be Ola. I think it actually might just be Ola. No G. And Ola is like this vampire MILF, who, I love her. She's a really good character. And I feel like the author perfectly captures the kind of old, sort of slightly jaded immortal, and she has just lost her sort of human husband, who she was with for a long time. But she also has a very kind of kind and gentle soul, which I feel is really nice to see in a vampire type character. And then also Dominic is this like, I think what are they called? Lamplighters, but they're like monster hunters anyway. And you can sort of see where it's going. So they kind of end up interacting with each other. And Dominic also sort of, I don't think befriends is the right word, gets his hands on this little spirit thing, who is such a great character. I can't quite remember the name. It's like Kata or Kaja or something. And I always love like little spirit type characters, so I really enjoyed that as well. So I thought it was a really good book if you like vampires. And I like vampire books actually. I'm living for this like resurgence that we're getting. And Prague as a setting is really good. They're like atmosphere, and I really enjoyed the characters. I feel like the plot maybe just could have been a little bit like smoother, but overall I really enjoyed it and would definitely recommend. After that I went on a bit of an Elizabeth Lim kick, so I'll just talk about them all together. So the first one I read Spin the Dawn, and then I read Unravel the Dusk. So I gave Spin the Dawn 3.5 stars and Unravel the Dusk 3 stars. So I definitely enjoyed it. Like, it's a really fast, fun sort of YA fantasy. I feel like, especially after having read Six Crimson Cranes, these ones definitely aren't as good, and they're a really good like fun read if you just want some like light, easy to read, a bit of angsty drama. Then they're good. And I did like Maya as main character. She's a little bit like not as thoroughly fleshed out as she could be, but I feel like the books are really short. Like the first one's only about 300 pages. I can't even, yeah, nearly 400 actually. But I feel like we just don't get a huge amount of exploration. And she sort of pretends to be her brother to enter this like tailoring competition to try and like become the imperial or royal tailor. Yeah, so that's kind of the start of the book. The thing I really liked about this one was the love interest, actually. I really liked him. I've already forgotten his name. Oh, Aiden. Yeah, Aiden. I really liked him, especially at the start of Spin the Dawn, like most of the book actually. Oh, yeah, especially the first half. I really liked his character. Then I feel like he does become a bit typical YA love interest later on, or not even typical YA love interest. I feel like he just becomes the love interest character, like very one-dimensional. But at the start of the book I really liked his sort of personality, and I think in Unravel the Dusk that was a little bit what I felt like was missing, the relationship. I would still recommend these, especially if you're a fan of YA fantasy. I think you would enjoy them, and the author's writing was really good actually. I did like that, but I just think there's a few more things that I would have liked added in to give them a bit of a higher rating. But then I read Six Crimson Cranes by the author, which was an arc, and I really enjoyed this. I gave it 4 stars I think, but it was definitely a step up from the Blood of Stars duology. And we're following Shiori, and she basically has magic, but she's like kept it hidden all her life, and she has this sort of evil stepmother who is a great character, who kind of curses her one day, and turns her brothers into these cranes. So she has 6 brothers, so they become 6 cranes, and basically for every like word or sound she makes, one of her brothers will die. So if she was to like speak a 6-word sentence, they would all die. And so yeah, so that's sort of the premise. And then throughout the book we sort of find out sort of secrets like coming to light, and that maybe the curse isn't entirely like what it seems, and more about kind of Shiori and her background. And also at the start of the book, Shiori is like engaged to be married to this prince, or is he a prince or some kind of important like noble, and she sort of runs away from the wedding. That's kind of like the opening scene. But as the book progresses, there's a sort of mistaken identities type thing later on, and I really liked the romance. I thought it was really good, and I feel like it just built on all the blocks, because I kind of liked the romance in the Blood of Stars, but I feel like it just wasn't quite like I love this. But I feel like this one built on the blocks and then made it really good, and I really liked the love interest. He was great, and yeah, I just really enjoyed it. I thought Shiori was a great character, and obviously I loved it because there was a tragic female villain. But no, the like stepmother character, I think she's Raikema, was a very interesting character. She was probably my favourite character, which is weird because like she's not the main character, or she's like the villain, but she's a very interesting character. And watch out, Maniza, there's someone coming for your top spot. But no, I think Raboniel will always be my top spot. Yeah, okay, anyway, but yeah, I would highly recommend that one as well. Then after that I read The Golden Fool by Robin Hobb, which, oh my gosh, this book was a ride. So I gave this one 4.5 stars, rounded up to 5, because I don't think a book has ever given me such a like visceral reaction. Like, I wanted to go and hit my head into a wall so many times. I was so frustrated with Fitz. I wanted to like shove his head into a blender or something. He just makes so many choices that were choices, and you just want to like bang, especially if it's in the fall, you want to bang their heads together. Yeah, there's just a lot of sort of interpersonal drama in Golden Fall. There wasn't that much of a plot. In fact, I can't really think of a plot at all, to be honest. I feel like a lot of it's kind of, the plot is like set up for the last book, and like forming a certain kind of group thing, which I did actually really like that side of things. I like getting to know more about Dutiful as a character, who's like the prince character, and I like, obviously I always like sort of Fitz. He's a very interesting character, but he sort of makes some slightly poor choices in this book. Although, no, it's not exactly poor choices, he just doesn't think things through, and he doesn't realise certain things, and I think he has a lot of sort of repressed bisexuality. Yeah, and you can sort of see him kind of spiralling into depression, and you're just like, no, save yourself, get some therapy, please. Yeah, so it's quite an emotional book and very frustrating, but also very good. Yeah, I feel like Robin Hobb has such a talent for like getting these emotional reactions out of you, because I found, well, Fool's Errand destroyed me, but also I found in the live ships books you often felt very like viscerally towards the characters, like certain characters you would just really hate, or like other characters you would like really want to protect, or I don't know, I feel like she just has such a good way of making the characters. So I really enjoyed Golden Fool, and I love the Fool so much. Oh, and I would just mention there's a character that appears who I love. She's also in the live ship books, but she makes an appearance in Golden Fool, and all her lines were so iconic. Oh, just great. So yeah, that's that one. I really enjoyed that one, obviously, despite wanting to tear my hair out. Okay, then after that I was lucky enough to read an arc of Under the Whispering Door by TJ Klune, and I gave this one 5 stars, which I really loved this one. So shockingly, I only gave House by the Cerulean Sea 4 stars, although I think if I was to reread it I might give it a 5. But I just felt like I really liked the characters in the House by the Cerulean Sea, especially what's his name, Lucy, the like little devil kid. But I don't know, there was just something, maybe like the themes and stuff didn't resonate as much with me, but I just loved Under the Whispering Door. I feel like it's darker than House by the Cerulean Sea, and almost in a way like more mature. Well, I guess the character's kind of older, but I just always loved themes around like death, and like what makes a good death, and sort of what comes after death, and like how can we care for people like on the next step of their journey, because I feel like that's a big part of medicine as well, like palliative care. So I find that really interesting. Also, there's quite a big thing with grief, so that's another thing that, and I think might be maybe quite hard to read, especially if you're someone who's like recently lost someone or something like that. So just kind of be aware of that. And I also really liked the kind of exploration of regret, and like looking back on your life and realising that maybe you haven't lived the life you wanted to, and just the kind of regrets and sadness that come with that. So I really found that very interesting, and I love the premise. So it's like this character Wallace, who's an absolute asshole. The first chapter is so funny. He's like firing this employee, and it was just hilarious. I know it probably wasn't meant to be funny, but I feel like TJ Klune's writing is very humorous, so it's quite interesting because it's an interesting like counterpoint with this kind of humour, with this kind of these very dark themes. So it I wouldn't even say they were dark themes, they're just kind of melancholy themes, I guess. So yeah, but then he unexpectedly dies, so then he basically becomes this ghost, and he goes to like the kind of crossing place, this house, so it's called, what's it called, Charon's Crossing, and it's like this tea shop which is run one of the characters who like helps ghosts move on to like the next step in their journey. And so it's just about Wallace sort of coming to terms with the fact he's dead, and like reflecting and living in his little tea shop. And there's also a lot of sort of theme about love as well, and different kinds of love. Like there's a lot about familial love, and also like love of a pet, and then like romantic love, friendship love, I don't know, a love of a child. There's a scene towards the end, which this one basically made me cry. And it's not about the main characters, it's sort of a side storyline, but just that, and I don't even have a child, but just the like mother and child thing just always gets me. Yeah, so that was also emotional. So yeah, there's a lot of different kind of themes, and I would just really recommend. I think it was very good. And also I think with TJ Klune's writing, it's like it feels like a warm hug, and it's quite a dark book, but you don't come out of it feeling like sad and depressed. You come out of it feeling quite hopeful, and like you've had a hug and just kind of almost full of joy and like wanting to live your life. I don't know, and I feel like that's a really nice feeling to come out of a book with. I feel like in the way it's quite similar to Psalm for the Wild Built in the type of like feeling it evokes from you. So yeah, would highly recommend to add to your pre-order list. Then after I read These Feathered Flames, which is a YA fantasy, and I gave this one 4.5 stars, which I really enjoyed this one. It follows these two sisters, and I think it follows the myth of the Firebird. So basically one of the sisters, Azaya, she is this Firebird, and she can kind of, I'm not entirely clear what her powers are. She like transforms into this Firebird, and her job is to like keep in balance the magic of the kingdom. And then her sister has been brought up to be queen, so she is like the princess, and she's like been navigating court life. And basically at the start of the book, the mother, the queen, kind of dies, so then the sister, Isabetta, has to become the queen. So, and the other sister, the Firebird, she gets dragged back to the court. So then it's kind of this like court politics. Which I really like. I really love the characters, they were really great, and I also like the writing, and the audiobook was really good. I really like the narrator, and interestingly it's the same narrator that does the what's the series called, Furyborn series by Claire Legrand, and I didn't actually like the Furyborn audiobook that much, but I really like These Feathered Flames. So I don't know if it's because when I listened to Furyborn, that was before I started speeding up audiobooks. So maybe I only like the like sped up version of this author's voice or something. But no, I really enjoyed the audiobook. Yeah, there's also a sapphic relationship, one pair of characters, which I really liked. It's sort of a bit Princess and the Bodyguard-y. Although it's not the princess, it's the Firebird character. And then the princess character also has a bit of a relationship going on with this like scholar type character, who I also love him as well. So yeah, I just really enjoyed that book. I think if you're looking for a really great YA fantasy, I would highly recommend. And there's a certain kind of YA fantasy which I really love. Like another example is sort of Crown of Feathers, is another one kind of similar to this. And I'm trying to think, like Never Tilting World. I don't know what sort of binds them together, but there's something about them that just makes me love them. Yeah, so anyway, that's that one. Okay, then after I read Children of Time, which I gave 4 stars to, and this book, especially looking like back on it and having finished it, it's so clever. And like, I think there's a quote on the cover which is like the smartest evolutionary world building you'll ever read, and that is honestly so true. It's like a masterpiece in like evolution. And you don't realise it, but throughout the book he's basically built this society from like hunter-gatherers to a spacefaring like species, and just watching the progression of that is really fascinating. So basically there's like these last remnants of the human race on a ship, and they're trying to like find somewhere that will save them, a planet. And they come across this planet which has been sort of abandoned like by the old humans, because basically there was a load of humans and then they all sort of died out, and then new humans came about. So but now the new humans are all dying off, so they're trying to save themselves. But there's all like the old empire have left this planet, which the planet is a bit mysterious. I don't know what it says. Yeah, so the new sort of masters of the planet have turned the planet into their own kind of world. So I think that's very interesting. And they're like interactions between the humans and the spiders. So basically the world is full of giant spiders. And just the spider society was so fascinating. It's like a matriarchal society, and it's very matriarchal, because sometimes I feel like matriarchal societies, and like especially in like YA fantasy, where it's like trying to be feminist, and it's like a good type of matriarchy, but in this one it's like the matriarchy as would be our patriarchy in a way. Like women are very like derogatory of men. Like I think there's this line about girls will be girls, and I just thought it was very interesting. Like the males are like so looked down on, but there's this little male spider called Fabian, who is the little cutest, and I love him. And towards the end of the book, and he just wants his rights. So like I support men's rights. Yeah, so he's a great character, and it's just very, I feel like I didn't get super attached to any of the characters, but I did really like sort of the world building, I think is the strongest point. And also the sort of science I thought was really interesting. Especially I love like evolutionary type science. I guess I will talk about it next because it's by the same author. I also reread Doors of Eden on audio, which for some random reason the publishers approved me for the audiobook on NetGalley about 8 months after the book actually came out. But I quite enjoyed it the first time, so I was excited to reread. And I actually really loved it on reread. I gave it 4.5 stars. Which the first time I read it I only gave it 3.75, but I just feel like I appreciated it so much more on reread. Yeah, so we're basically following Mal and Lee, who are these pair of girlfriends who have sort of grown up together, and they've always been like very close, and they are like monster hunting. They like to monster hunt. So one day they go to this like Bodmin Moor, I think it's in Cornwall or something, and Mal goes missing. So then it's like skips forward a few years. And basically Lee is just like living her life, and then Mal gets back in contact like mysteriously. So that was kind of that. And then there's also a few other characters, like there's this MI5 guy called like Julian, and he's sort of investigating things that are going on. He gets sort of dragged into the whole conspiracy, and it's basically this like parallel worlds, and there's sort of doors between the worlds, and the doors are sort of the like universe is sort of collapsing, so they end up having to like save the universe, basically this like team of people. So I think it's very interesting, and again it's a very interesting sort of evolutionary biology type book, because all these different worlds have evolved very differently, and in little clips between each chapter there's like a snippet where it talks about one of the worlds and how it's sort of evolved, and I think that's very interesting. And I really like the relationship, especially between Lee and Mal, and a lot of the other characters grew on me on reread. Like the first time I didn't really like Julian, I was like, why am I following him? But I quite enjoyed his parts this time round. And there's another character called Kayamal Khan, who is a really great character. Just like, she steals every scene she's in. She's very kind of outspoken and sort of vivacious. And there's a bit of a theme of kind of, I don't know what the, like, nationalism, the kind of bad one anyway, and I feel like it's kind of nicely parallels like our society. Yeah, it's quite political, which I think is good, because I like it when books sort of explore politics. So yeah, that was very interesting. Why did I say the word interesting? That was very enjoyable and interesting. So yeah. Okay, then after that I read Chaos Vector by Megan O'Keefe, which is the second book in the Protectorate series. So the first one is Velocity Weapon, which I read in April, and I really enjoyed that one, and I really enjoyed the sequel. I didn't enjoy it quite as much as book one, because I feel like book one had a certain element of it which just made it amazing, which in this one there's a certain character who I was a bit worried wouldn't be in the book at all, but they did show up later on, so that was good. And yeah, I really like that. There were some reveals in this book which was very interesting, and I feel like it's really hard to talk about without spoilers, but I would definitely really recommend the series, and the sequel is really good. There was so basically a major part of the storyline in the second book sort of is linked to a POV that you get in the first book, but I never really paid that much attention to that POV because that was always my least favourite one. But then I realised in the second one that maybe I should have paid a bit more attention. But Anyway, in the sequel, I really like getting to know some new characters that we sort of didn't know as much about in book 1. And obviously I like following the characters that we already met, like Sander and Biren. And also I liked Biren's love interest. I thought that was quite cute. But I feel like we'll might see more of that in book 3. And I like Sander and Thomas, and what sort of happens to their relationship I thought was very interesting. And I'm really excited to see what happens with that in book 3 as well. And I feel like if you like talking AI spaceships, then this is definitely a good series. So I would highly recommend that one. I feel like I don't want to say much more because like it's a sequel and I enjoyed it. I don't know what else to say. Then I read the Gutter Prayer, which I gave 3.5 stars, and I did really enjoy this one. I just feel like sometimes as I was reading it, I would just sort of, I don't know, like zone out a bit, or not even zone out. I just feel like something about the writing style just didn't quite click. But we're basically following these 3 sort of thieves. One is Carrie, one is Spar, who is like this rock guy. It's a stone man, I think, and he's basically like slowly turning to stone. And he has to have this chemical to like stop him from becoming stone. And also Rat, who is like this ghoul. Yeah, so, and at the start of the book they sort of get framed for like blowing up this tower. And then we're kind of following them as they sort of navigate city politics and become sort of quite wanted. And there's also this whole thing going on with these black iron gods, and they're sort of old gods who have kind of been imprisoned, but like maybe they're coming back and you can sort of communicate with them, and there's some like mysterious sort of magical forces on the rise. I really like Carrie as main character. She's very sort of spunky. Yeah, I wasn't such a big fan of like Spar. I thought he was a bit boring, but I did like sort of the ending of his story, or the ending of his arc in this book. And I liked Rat as a character. We didn't see that much of him, but I always kind of like ghouls and ghosts and that type of character. And the setting was really cool as well. It's a dark city type thing. Like I guess it's a bit like Prague-y type city. I don't know. Actually, I'm sure there's an author interview at the end where he talks about what cities inspired. That's it, Edinburgh. It reminds me of Edinburgh. It also says is mostly Cork. I've never been to Cork, but I can imagine that sort of thing. So yeah, I think it's an interesting book. I would definitely recommend if you like fantasy, especially if you like sort of dark, like Lies of Locke Lamora type fantasy. I think you would enjoy, and I'm planning on reading the rest of the series quite soon because I have an arc of the last one, so I am excited to see where the rest of it sort of goes. I read The Best of All Possible Worlds by Karen Lord, which I really love. This one I gave it 4.5 rounded up to 5, but yeah, it was really good. So this one we're following this character called Grace, and she is basically this sort of government official type thing, and she ends up working with these Sadri. So the Sadri at the start of the book have this like massive disaster on their world, so they sort of become refugees, and she works with one of them who is called, what's he called, can't say it, Dalanika. So the book is basically them and a couple of other characters on their little crew travelling around the planet trying to find like people with Sadri genes to try and continue like the Sadri population, and just sort of expand on the culture. So this is very interesting, and it's more of a quieter book. It's like similar to kind of Becky Chambers in a way. But this has one of the best like slow burn romances I've read. It was so good. I was so invested, and just like, oh, and it's the type of dynamic where it's like the really sort of like stoic and like slightly yeah, like reserved type, doesn't show their emotions, but like deep down they're a cinnamon roll, and then the sort of slightly feral, like flirty other character, and I just really like that dynamic. And I really like sort of just the exploration of like what it means to be human, and like what your culture sort of means to you, and like just the exploration of the themes I thought was really excellent, and the writing is really good. I really like her writing, and just the sort of finding where you belong. I really like that theme. Yeah, like finding your place and finding your people, and just so I would really highly recommend. I'm really excited to read more of Karen Lord's books. But yeah, if there's one book you take away from this video, let it be this one. Although there is another one coming up, and also Under the Whispering Door and the Turning Man trilogy. I feel like I read a lot of books, good books, so would recommend a lot. I really enjoyed it. And it just, again, it's another like Becky Chambers type book. Like it feels like a warm hug while you're reading, and you end up like leaving it feeling so sort of content and like happy and like just wanting to hug all your family. I don't know, I really enjoyed it, so yeah. Then after that I read An Arc of the Bone Way by Holly Underhill, I think. And this is a sapphic Orpheus and Eurydice retelling, which I thought was really cool. I really like Hadestown. Well, I don't know how much I like Hadestown. I like listening to the music, but then one time I watched a bootleg and I didn't really understand it. So yeah, I don't know how I feel about that. But anyway, I really like the story, and I thought this was a really cool twist on it. I like that they're like wives, and then basically the main character Tegan, she's sort of dying of this like poison. So her wife Cress wants to try and save her by following this like myth of the shadow lady. So she sort of goes into the underworld to try and get this like cure. But then Tegan ends up following her because she's like, my wife's gone missing. And then they end up, it's quite short, so there's not a huge like complex plot, but so she basically has to travel through the underworld, and she like battles all these monsters, and it's a good atmosphere, like the creepy like bone, I guess the bone way, which is cool. And then yeah, they end up having to sort of leave, and they can't, well, it's not, because I guess in the original myth it's like they can't look back, but in this one it's they can't touch each other. And they have to try and escape that way. But yeah, I thought it was really good. I like the writing. I like the relationship. I feel like I only gave it 4 stars because I feel like I often feel like this with novellas. I just wanted a little bit more. Like, I feel like there was a lot of interesting things that could have been explored, especially the like shadow queen who's like in charge of the underworld. I think she would have been a very interesting character to explore more of. And I feel like I would have liked to see more of Tegan and Cress's relationship, like building up to that point, and just, I don't know, it was really enjoyable for a novella. And I like just the kind of exploring like what you're willing to do for another person, and like being willing to sacrifice yourself for them. And I don't know, I just really liked it. So yeah, we'll definitely recommend that one. I also read Seasons of Albedown, which is another sort of novella type book, and this one's like a collection of 4 different kind of tales. This one does feel very like a sort of folklore like collection of tales, and it's sort of set in like there's like spring, summer, autumn, winter. I think it's actually autumn, winter, spring, summer. That's the order that it goes in. And this one was really good. So we're kind of, it's all set in this like Albedown, like the country, but it's kind of following 4 different characters, but all their storylines sort of weave together. So there is sort of a kind of storyline throughout, but it's just these 4 like little tales. And yeah, I just really enjoyed it, and it's very sort of Grimm's fairy tale-esque. Like the stories have quite dark themes to them, and often quite like dark twists. And I really enjoyed that. The first time, because like at the start of the book you feel like, oh, this is nice cozy wholesome fantasy, and then something happens like in the first like story, but towards the end of the first story, and it like will shock you to your core. Like, I was not expecting it, and yeah, and then I think from there the tone gets a lot darker. But I really enjoyed it, and I like the sort of the kind of classic like fairy tale like moral of the story type thing, so I would definitely recommend that one. And I hope that authors write more in the world, because I think it's a very interesting world. I definitely recommend that one. And then After that I read Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, which I gave 5 stars to, and honestly I think I might have liked this one even more than The Martian, which I really enjoyed The Martian, but this one just had certain characters in it who I just loved, and they're just like my type of characters. So I feel like people said before going into it, don't know too much about it, and I feel like that's good, so I won't really give too much of a synopsis. But basically the main character Ryden, he like wakes up on the ship and he doesn't know who he is, he doesn't know where he is, like he's got amnesia basically, and yeah, so it's about him trying to solve like what's happened to him, so that's basically the premise, and yeah, I really liked it. I would really recommend the audiobook because there's a certain element of it that works really well like with sound, so yeah, I would highly recommend that. And what I will say is it follows a very sort of specific type of specific type of sci-fi trope, which is one of my favourite types of sci-fi trope, which I just loved. And there's a character called Rocky who I adore. I love, yeah, so, oh yeah, anyway. And there's another character called Strat who is really good. She's like a sort of, if you know anything about my type then you will know what she's like, but yeah, I loved her character. She just made every scene that she was in, and again it's in a similar way to The Martian. It's kind of following like 2 storylines, so it's like following Rylan and his spaceship, but then it's also following sort of the past because he's sort of slowly gaining his memories back, so we're also seeing his memories like on Earth. So that's quite interesting, and I really like the sort of balance in the book because there's a lot of science, which is another thing I really liked about The Martian, but in addition to, because obviously it's set in space, so there's a lot of like physics and maths, but I also really like there's a huge amount of biology in the book, so yeah, I won't say why it's biology but there it is, and I really enjoyed that one because obviously I'm a big fan of biology. So yeah, I really like that, and I just, yeah, just the whole storyline of what happens I just really loved, and it's kind of less sort of down to earth than The Martian was. I guess down to earth maybe isn't the right term like less grounded in reality, but I think I liked it more because of that in a way, and it feels more higher stakes because obviously The Martian is very high stakes for Mark Watney, but this one is very like high stakes for sort of the entire world, so that was really good. And the ending, oh, it made me so emotional. You sort of get a sense like about halfway through the book that it's coming and you know what's gonna happen, but just the emotions and then just the way it ends is just perfect, but also so kind of, oh, it made me very emotional, so yeah, would definitely recommend that one. And then the final book I read was Lost in the Netherwoods by Aiden Thomas, and I gave this one 3.5 stars. So it's kind of a Peter Pan like retelling, but basically it's like Wendy, we're following Wendy when she's about 18 and her brothers have been missing for like many years, and she comes across this boy in the woods who's like claiming to be Peter Pan, and also claiming that Wendy like used to know him and like spent some time in like Neverland. So yeah, and it's basically Peter has lost his shadow, so then Peter and Wendy have to try and solve the mystery of what's happened to his shadow and also what's like happened to these children who are going missing. So yeah, I thought it was really enjoyable. I feel like it just wasn't anything like super special, so like I enjoyed listening to it, but it's not something I'm gonna like think about or probably reread ever. I think like it's a solid book, but it's not something that I would like go back to, if that makes sense. Because I feel like I kind of like Peter Pan, but it's not my favourite story ever. I think if you're a big fan of Peter Pan, you definitely enjoy it. Like, although it's not really the story of Peter Pan, it's kind of a like, I don't even say it's like a retelling because it's not exactly following the same storyline, but it's just kind of following the characters of Peter Pan. Yeah, I don't know if I'm making any sense. I do like Aiden Thomas's writing. It's very sort of not like simplistic, but like it's just very sort of comforting and like nostalgic in a way. Yeah, it does kind of almost feel a bit like a bedtime story, which is quite a nice feeling, I think. So yeah, I enjoyed it, but I don't think it's like a new favourite or anything. So yeah, so that is my wrap up for the month of May. Definitely let me know in the comments what you read in May. I would really love to know, and what your favourite book that you read was. And if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like and consider subscribing if you haven't already. And I hope you're all having a really great day, and I will see you next time.